Hi, this is Kyle Blakely with Mark Waller, and this is another episode of We Have Issues. Again, remember, you can go on YouTube or Facebook and follow us, preferably on YouTube, or you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. But we really would hope that you go follow us on YouTube so you can see our charming faces every week as we're doing the episodes.
Hey, like and subscribe. That's what you need to do. Like and subscribe. If you want to continue to get this titillating information that we provide to you every week, like and subscribe. Also, leave us a comment if you want other titillating information.
Exactly. Leave comments on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever. At the end of the episode, I'll give you Mark's phone number if you want to leave comments there.
Listen, I get plenty of those already, Kyle. You know, all of my Republican friends are, on me all the time about how I've, trying to hold Republicans accountable in this election cycle and others. One of my favorite sayings, Republicans are all about personal responsibility for everybody but themselves.
Exactly.
Which just, golly, drives me nuts. Kyle.
Yes.
I see that you're in Chicago. Obviously, I can't think of anything that might be going on there other than you're there to see a couple of ball games. I'm a huge Cubs fan. You'll be at Wrigley Field later today. Is that why you're there?
Well, I think it's been long enough they'll let me back in. The only time I've ever been to Wrigley Field, I got thrown out of the game with a group of people probably having too much fun in the bleachers. So I may go back and try that, but I'm really here for the Democratic National Convention because I really wanted to go somewhere where I could see a lot of Republicans speaking. And there's several of them speaking at the Democratic National Convention this week in support of Kamala Harris, of all things. So very interesting. Stephanie Grisham, Trump's former press secretary, is speaking on behalf of Kamala later this week. Adam Kinzinger, congressman, former congressman. There's the mayor from Arizona that came out a few weeks ago in support of Harris. So I think there's several that are going to be here speaking this week.
So I understood you lined all them up, right? You lined all the Republicans up that were speaking at the Democratic National Convention this week. Is that right?
That is, and in fact, you and
Kinzinger,
yes,
like super close.
Actually, it's the website rhino.com, and we go out and recruit Republicans to speak on behalf of the Democratic ticket. So,
well, it's
just kidding. Don't go look up rhino.com. Although it'd be interesting to see what you'd find there.
You know what we should do? We should actually reserve that website because I'll bet it's out there. Rhino.com, rhino.net, rhinosuck.com, rhinosawesome.com.
Yeah, we should go check on that. So,
I always thought, just real quick, speaking of baseball and rhinos, one of my favorite baseball players of all time is a guy named Ryne Sandberg. Yep. And his nickname is Rhino.
Yep.
So I actually look at Rhino as a term of endearment.
Yes. For the Cubbies. Yeah, I would love to go to another game at Wrigley Field at some point.
Your face is on the wall at the ticket booth there. Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
Yep. They marched 18 of us out in a row. We were all sitting in a row and they just came down in the 7th inning and marched us all out. So
you're the first person I've ever known in person to get kicked out of a baseball game. That must have been hellacious.
That was a bachelor party. So in my 20s, 35 years ago or more. So
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, let's move on to kind of today's.
Let's move on from Kyle's indiscretions and talk about other stuff. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just reason number 642. I can never run for public office.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you want to be careful about that. You don't want to get too much of that history out there. Although it is important to get out in front of it on your own. So maybe you're doing the right thing here if you ever decide to run in some way or something.
So today is going to be a continuation of last week's conversation about the ballot issues in Colorado this year. And before we get started, I need to make a correction. Last week, I was under the impression that there were going to be that there were already 10 issues approved for the Colorado ballot. I was so far off, it's not even funny. I relied on a source that had old information. So I've learned one of my journalistic lessons here is to double check or make sure that I'm looking at a reliable source. So in fact, there are only 3 ballot issues confirmed for this year, and another 6 that I did have that right last week. There's another 6 that are still waiting to be determined if they have enough signatures to get on.
So, Kyle, a couple of thoughts here, first of all, or a couple of thoughts here before we get into the discussion about the ballot initiatives. Number one, accuracy in politics is overrated today. People could fact check that, and you actually you don't have to admit that you were wrong about anything. Just blame it on the source that you got it from. It's somebody else's fault that happened. But again, you ever decide to run for office, you got to be careful here because you don't want to admit liability or fault on your own. It's always somebody else's fault. And just say, the number of ballot issues are huge. It's huge.
Huge. Well,
Huge.
I'll have to remember that if I do at some point decide to run for office.
Yeah. We'll just leave it at that. But hey, if that happens, listen, I'm going to be an advisor. Help you out, move you in the right direction, based on all the success I've had in public office over the years, which is, somewhat minimal.
You'd be my campaign manager.
You wouldn't want that. Terrible. Horrible at organizing.
Nice. Well, let's start today with a little bit of something that we talked about last week because there have been some new developments. Why don't you jump in and talk about issues 50 and 108? And what's going on around those?
Yeah, so we talked about those last week. One of them is Constitutional Initiative 50 is a constitutional amendment that caps the property tax growth rate moving forward. So right now there's some legislation passed last year that capped property tax growth rate at 5.5% a year. This initiative would cap property tax growth rate at 4%. So, in years where economy is booming, property taxes or property rates, property valuations go up significantly, then their effective property taxes then couldn't go up beyond 4% a year. So, if you're, whatever your property taxes are, you could be able to count on them not going up a significant amount every year. The most they could go up is 4% a year, and some of us experience, 15, 20, 30, 40% a year over the last few years, just because the cost of housing has just gone up pretty significantly, right? So Initiative 50 cap that property tax growth rate. Initiative 108 just simply reduces it for the next fiscal year and says we're going to reduce the amount of property taxes that citizens have to pay. Well, that one comes to the tune of about $3 billion to local governments. But Initiative 108 says the state has to backfill 2.25 billion of that. Backfill 2.25 billion of that to the people to be impacted by this are school districts, special districts, and counties. That's effectively who Initiative 108 would impact, because they're the ones that rely on property taxes. And Initiative 108 says, state, you're going to have to backfill K through 12 education, and you're going to have to backfill special districts. So that's going to cost the state $2.25 billion. And realistically,
like in 1 year.
In 1 year, just for 1 year, 2.25 billion. And realistically, the state the legislature only has the ability to impact of their $40 billion budget, they only have the ability to impact spending on about 8 or 10 billion of that, maybe as much as 15 billion. But so when you're really talking about this, you're not talking about 2.25 billion out of 40 billion. You're talking about 2.25 billion out of, somewhere between 8 and 15 billion, which is significant for the state legislature. So if Initiative 108 passes and they have to backfill, number one, counties, 64 counties across the state of Colorado are going to have projected 7.5 or 750 million less in revenues that they'd be able to spend. And the state's going to have 2.25 billion less in revenue that they'll be able to spend, which means higher education gets cut and transportation.
And tons of services at the county level all over the state.
Yep. Yeah. Counties, roads and bridges, counties, I was just having this discussion with some county folks earlier today. It's a tough place for counties to be, especially conservative counties,
Yep.
Who don't want to oppose 108 and 50 because they get and understand that this is, property taxes are growing out of control for citizens, and they don't want to see that happen. But at the same time, those property taxes are growing out of control, inflation's growing out of control, and their workers, are trying to keep up with that inflationary spending, which means that they got to pay staffs more. Well, you take this 800 million or 750 million out of counties, that means workforce suffers. And it's, cost of insurance is going up, right? So, all of those issues suffer. So less money to roads and bridges, less money to recruit and retain quality staff. It's going to really create problems. But at the same time, they understand we don't want our taxes to go up.
Yeah.
On properties, because that's growing out of control right now. So those initiatives are on the ballot. One of them hasn't been certified on signatures yet, but it will be. 108, I think, is the one that has not been certified on signatures, but it will be. And so the legislature and the governor in particular, the governor and the state legislature together understand that these things pass, it's going to have a humongous fiscal impact on the state budget for the next year. And so the governor said, hey, can we figure this out in some way? And so as we've talked about on the podcast numerous times or over the last few weeks, the governor was looking at calling a special session and has now done that.
Yep.
To try to fix these issues. And so what they've tried to do is engage in negotiation and discussion between the proponents of these initiatives and then the legislators to say, is there a compromise that we can come up with?
So and I keep hearing about this, that they're calling the session to discuss a compromise. Is there anything out there in the news or anywhere, anybody you've talked to, that spells out just what the compromise could be?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple of spreadsheets on what the potential compromise could be, but effectively, it's the difference between the legislation that was passed last year. I think it was Senate Bill 233, I think was the bill that capped property tax rate growth at 5.5% and reduce the overall tax rate. So the compromise is somewhere between what that bill did and what initiatives 50 and 108 would do. And there's varying disparities on if there is some sort of compromise in place, what that compromise could be, and where the legislature would go with it. If, who's the compromise between, right? Is it between the governor and the proponents? Well, the legislature also has to approve it and support it. So there are some ideas of what a compromise could look like. And some people have said, well, why call a legislative session unless you have that compromise in place, right?
Yeah. So maybe there's been backroom discussions on what that is. I mean, all
Well,
I've seen was the supporter or the people that the folks that put the issue on the ballot have just said a modest package of additional tax cuts and stronger limits on property tax growth would get them to compromise. Still pretty vague, but I mean, there could be a lot of things that fall within that.
yeah, I mean, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason that this special session's been called, and I don't really truly believe that there is a compromise in place as of yet, is because that special session has to happen before ballots get printed.
Yes.
So they are up against a hard deadline here. And I think ballots have to be printed by like September 4th.
Yeah.
So,
Somewhere 4th or 6th or something
yeah,
like that.
something like that. But early part of September, right? So
Yeah.
they got to get this special session done. There has to be so many notification requirements in order to have a special session. So I think, the feeling is amongst the Democratic leadership in the House and Senate and the governor's mansion is, well, the risk of having a failure of a special session isn't as significant as the risk of 108 and 50 passing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
So,
that's really what this is. To a certain degree, it's a game of chicken.
so how many bills do you think, Kyle, it takes in order to successfully negotiate the single property tax issue in a legislative special session?
5.
I was going to say, take the number and multiply it by 2, and you're still not going to be close. 19 proposed bills for this special session right now. 19.
Just around that one topic?
Just around that one topic.
So
now, I don't think all of those bills get introduced, but right now they're talking 19 different bills.
So I assume some of those are people who are in the know, who kind of have a feel for what some of these, but are some of them probably just legislators figuring, hell, we're going to talk about this. Let's throw some ideas out there.
Sure, I think some of them will be statements by Republicans.
Oh, okay.
That'll be some of the bills that come forward, and the Democrats will dispatch with those in committee. I think some of them are, well, if this is the compromise, this is what the bill is going to be. If something else is the compromise, then this other bill will be the bill to help solve that problem.
Okay.
Probably a lot of it has to do with how backfill happens. Do special districts still get backfilled? K through 12 is going to have to be backfilled. What's backfill look like for local governments? So there's going to be a lot of different moving parts there.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, this obviously the special session is going to happen, but I don't know if resolution comes out of it.
Yeah. And so it has to be at least a 3-day session. Is there a maximum length it could be? I mean, obviously they're up against the September 4th or 6th deadline, but is it automatically just 3 days, or could it go for 2 weeks or a week and a half?
No, the governor can make that determination. My guess is it's open-ended with the assumption that it's only going to be 3 days.
Okay. Okay. So you're actually going to be up there at the Capitol for part of this. So maybe next week you'll be the correspondent on location for
That's right.
For the podcast. We'll be able to maybe hear kind of firsthand how it started, or at least the first couple of days, kind of where it seems to be headed. So that should be an interesting update.
Yeah, and I think there's another legal issue here that hasn't been resolved yet, and that's what happens. Can you pull an initiative off the ballot that has already been certified to the ballot? Like, I don't think there's a question about being able to do it before it's certified, before the signatures are certified and it's certified to the ballot. I think you can pull it. But once it's certified, I think there's a question there about what can happen.
Yeah.
Can somebody pull it off the ballot? And if somebody does, can there be a legal challenge to it?
Interesting. So you try and pull it off, somebody files a suit to keep it on, and then you got to go through the courts. my guess is that would take a lot longer than the September 6th deadline. So then what happens?
Well, I think the courts would, understanding the immediacy of the issue, would take it on rather quickly and come up with a resolution, just make that determination whether or not something can stay on the ballot or has to come off the ballot.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think that's how that ends up happening.
yeah. Well, this
A
one's
lot
gonna
of questions.
follow. Yeah, ton of questions. So let's go ahead then and jump into the other ballot issues that there's two that are definitely on the ballot for this fall. Issue 89, the right to abortion, and issue 91, prohibiting trophy hunting. So why don't we start with 89 and the right to abortion? It's a constitutional amendment that would forever, unless it got voted out at some point, but would guarantee the right to abortion for all Coloradans.
Yeah, and so to be clear, there are 3 that have been certified to the ballot. One of them was 50 that we talked about earlier. So just want to make sure everybody understands that. And by the way, of the 9 of these that are currently out there, 3 are constitutional. The remaining 6 are statutory changes.
Yep.
Which means takes in order for these constitutional amendments to pass, takes 55% of the vote. The benefit to having those is then it makes it harder for the legislature to overturn those later. However, if it's statutory, the legislature can change the statutes at any time during a legislative session, right? So that's why people would put stuff in the Constitution as opposed to on the ballot. And I told you last week that the Constitution in the state of Colorado takes up about a ream of paper, actually 207 pages.
Okay, about a ream.
Yeah, 207 pages, whereas the United States Constitution is about 15 pages. So as you can see, super easy to amend the Constitution in the state of Colorado. But let's talk about those initiatives now. Right to abortion. This is one. File this Mark's opinion. File this in the category of completely unnecessary from a policy perspective in the state of Colorado.
And why is that in your view?
Right now, in the state of Colorado, Colorado has the most liberal abortion laws in the entire union. In fact, I could make an argument that even in California, their abortion laws are more restrictive than they are in Colorado. So, for example, California has a fetal homicide law. Remember the whole Lacey Peterson case from a few years ago? In that circumstance, Scott Peterson was charged with 2 counts of murder. 2 counts. One for Lacey Peterson, one for unborn, I believe it was Connor Peterson was the unborn child's name. Colorado, we don't have a provision for murdering a baby or a fetus in utero.
Okay.
We have this, wrongful termination of a fetus, but can't be charged for murder, right?
But is our current law constitutional or statutory?
So our laws are statutory,
okay.
Right? So current laws, obviously any of the criminal justice stuff, statutory. Or almost all of criminal justice stuff is statutory. Obviously that's hard enough to change in the state legislative process. This would confirm rights to abortion for all time in the Constitution of the state of Colorado. And that's abortion up until birth, right? Up until the minute before a woman gives birth, you can have an abortion in the state of Colorado. It's been that way forever, regardless of Roe versus Wade. Regardless of the Dobbs decision, it has been that way in Colorado forever. And in order for that to change, and you bring up the point, change it statutorily, that requires the legislature, the House, passing a bill, the Senate passing that same bill, and then the governor signing it, right? which right now, as you know, Democrats have supermajorities in the House and Senate, or near supermajorities in the House and Senate, supermajority in the House, near supermajority in the Senate. And we've literally had, 2 Republican governors in the last 60 years in the state of Colorado. There is no chance that in the foreseeable future, Colorado abortion law changes from what it is today, regardless of this constitutional amendment or not. There's just, this is going to do nothing to change policy in the state of Colorado. And so you might say, well, why does somebody go through the expense of getting 125 or 130,000 signatures to put an issue like this on the ballot, right?
Yeah.
This is all done. And keep in mind, at one point, the Democrats had Joe Biden as their nominee, and nobody was excited about that. And so they looked, and this is, a tried and true practice, right? Both sides do it. Let's find some ballot initiatives that create voter intensity, that get our side out to vote, that get the base out to vote in greater numbers that otherwise wouldn't be excited. That is, in my mind, in my opinion, 100% what initiative number 89 is all about. It's about creating voter intensity. And the Democrats are doing this across the nation right now, putting all these abortion issues on the ballot. They understand that voters don't consider this a significant issue, abortion a significant issue. I mean, they're way more concerned about the economy, way more concerned about the border, way more concerned about criminal justice matters. But the Democrats feel this is the kind of thing that gets their people out to vote.
So let me ask you a question then, because I feel like the other reason these might be going on the ballot, or an additional reason, is if Trump gets reelected, there is some talk about pushing for a national abortion ban. And especially if the Republicans pick up the House, or keep the House, pick up the Senate. I mean, there is a scenario where the Republicans could have all 3 in Washington, and a federal abortion ban, would a constitutional amendment in Colorado protect that right in Colorado, or does a federal law or whatever override that?
Federal law overrides the Colorado Constitution. Look at it this way. We had in the Colorado Constitution marriage as being between a man and a woman, right? And then the federal government at some point said, marriage can happen. And I guess this was in the courts. Marriage can be between anybody, right? Between man and a man, woman and a woman, man and a woman. That overrode the Colorado Constitution.
Okay.
So federal statute, federal preemption would apply in those circumstances.
Okay.
So it doesn't, I'm telling you, in my opinion, this initiative doesn't do anything to protect anything.
Okay. Okay. Great. All right. Let's talk about issue 91, prohibiting trophy hunting, specifically of mountain lions, bobcats, and lynx. And this would be a statutorial change.
Yep. This is one that, these things irritate me. And this is, in my mind, this is a little bit more like the reintroduction of wolves to Colorado.
Yeah.
We did that statutorily a few years ago. I think this is one of those circumstances where you're going to have a lot of people voting on an issue that has zero impact to them.
Yep.
So, for example, 99%, whatever it is, percent of the population of Colorado has zero interaction, whether it's from a hunting perspective or protection of livestock or whatever, has zero interaction with mountain lions, lynx, or bobcats, right? I mean, literally 99% of the population has no interaction, and they're going to be voting on this. So the proponents of this initiative have kind of come up with a slick title and say, hey, this is about trophy hunting. And maybe in some circumstances it is. Some people come in, they want to hunt these things because they want to, mount the head on their wall. But I think more times than not, this is about protection of livestock. about protection of rural Colorado's way of life. But people who are going to vote on this initiative aren't going to understand that. They're just going to vote on it based on the title of it, which is trophy hunting.
Yeah.
But this prevents now a rancher from being able to kill a bobcat or a mountain lion that is impacting their livestock.
Yeah. And again, I'm not a hunter. I've done some work for the Colorado Division of Parks and Wildlife over the years. So I have a, somewhat of an understanding of animal population control, like deer hunting. I mean, if you did away with deer hunting, the population would explode. Hundreds of thousands of them would die anyway from starvation. I mean,
or getting hit by cars,
or more getting hit by cars, all of those things. So again, what little I know, my picture is, okay, if you stop killing these predators, that's going to impact the population of some other wild animal, and it's going to throw that out of whack. And again, what are the long-term issues with wildlife in Colorado that you could run into if this passes?
Yeah, and I think it could have a devastating impact on the economies of rural Colorado's, again, especially with ranchers, people that, host hunting expeditions for elk or deer or whatever else it is. If those populations are reduced significantly, which could happen as a result of this as well.
Exactly.
And other, recreational hunting.
Yeah.
I think the key to this is managing populations. I think the Department of Wildlife does that really well right now. We have a lot of safeguards and protections in place. And it seems to me this is one of those initiatives that's put forward that people are going to vote on, and they're not going to understand what it is they're voting for.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, let's dive into, there's 5 more issues besides 108 that are waiting to see if they've got enough signatures. So let's touch on each one of these a little bit. So the first one, issue 112, has to do with eligibility for parole for people convicted of felonies in Colorado. And I read it, and there's like 4 areas to it, depending on if you're convicted before January 1st of 2025 or after January 1st, and the levels of crimes. And that then determines what percentage of your sentence you absolutely have to serve. So talk a little bit about this one. You're an attorney. So how does this impact the state?
Yeah, as I've gone through this one, I've tried to figure out what the proponents are trying to do here. So we have 6 different classifications of felonies in the state of Colorado, 1 through 6, right? 6 being the lowest level of felony, voter fraud, stuff like that, to 1 being capital murder, intentional murder that you're, doing with purpose, right? We no longer have the death penalty in the state of Colorado. That was removed by the legislature a couple of years ago. So the maximum punishment somebody can serve in the Colorado State Penitentiary for conviction of a crime is life without the possibility of parole.
Okay.
But that can only be done in certain circumstances. That's done when, capital cases, right? Those are the only, like, those sort of class 1 felonies are the ones that require serving with no possibility of parole. It seems to me what's happening here is trying to create some sort of truth in sentencing, where people are required to serve so much of their sentence before they are eligible for parole. But it's just one of those that, again, I think the possibility of unintended consequences could be pretty significant here. And you have to ask yourself, especially when it comes to these statutory changes, why are the proponents of this taking it to a vote of the people as opposed to trying to make a legislative change here where you can have all of the experts show up to testify and be part of the stakeholder group to make sure we're coming up with good policy for the people of the state of Colorado. So for example, this issue goes through the legislature. You have the DAs testifying about it. You have the defense attorneys testifying about it. You even have, in some certain circumstances, courts will weigh in on these, not usually not on the policy changes themselves, but how it impacts sentencing. They might weigh in that way. You'd have victims groups testifying on it. You'd have,
Yeah.
other different groups testifying on these issues, but which then, hopefully get you to better public policy. When you put these issues on the ballot, you have to question, what the proponents are trying to do and why they haven't been successful at the, through the legislative process in order to pass this.
Well, and my assumption again is because the Dems have such control in Denver that for conservatives, my guess is this was a conservative issue put on the ballot because they know, at least for the foreseeable future, there's almost no hope of getting issues through like this in Denver. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of the way I took this one, was that this is, again, a way for conservatives to get one of their issues out there and possibly get something through.
Yeah, and again, this is probably a truth in sentencing initiative that wants to make sure people that are convicted are serving the proportion of their sentence that they're supposed to serve.
Yeah,
and that's the idea behind it. There are a lot of ways around these things. I think judges take into account, good time, how quickly somebody can be paroled when they engage in the sentencing process.
yeah,
And so is this going to just, reduce the length of terms of sentences that are imposed by judges? I don't know.
interesting.
But this is going to come with a, pretty hefty fiscal note as it relates to spending in the Department of Corrections.
Okay. Next issue, 138, school choice. And in this instance, so Colorado already has what they call school choice, and that's within public schools. You can choice into any public school in Colorado that you want to. This issue is school choice more in the terms that you think about it when it's discussed nationally, and being able to take your portion, your child's portion of the state school allocation per student, and use that wherever you want, even for homeschooling, but private schools or homeschool.
Charter.
Yeah, charter schools, in addition to, so it would open up all the options.
Yeah, and I think you can make the same argument for this one that I'm making for the abortion initiative, right? Which is it necessary? Do we need to put in the Colorado Constitution, and this is a constitutional issue, do we need to put in the Colorado Constitution preservation of school choice?
Well, I mean, it does expand what is allowed now. I get that. But yeah, does it need to be a constitutional change?
And I think the proponents of this would argue that, the abortion issue is less relevant because the Democrats have control of all three legs of the stool. This one's more relevant now because the Democrats have all three legs of the stool, right?
Yeah.
Like the Democrats aren't generally supportive of the teachers union, who are not fans of choice in education, in particular homeschooling, charter schools, and private schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
They think education is a publicly funded endeavor, and it should be that, and not more than that.
Okay. Okay. Next one, issue 145, creating a veterinary professional associate licensure in the state of Colorado. I must admit I'm much less up to speed on this one, but I do know that from time to time, if it involves licensure for a position, it does have to go through, or be done statutorily or through the ballot. Is that correct?
Yeah, what? Kyle, you're not up to date on this initiative? Come on, don't you have a, do you, I can just see it right now. Again, it's this going to be, I hope you never run for office because it's going to be Kyle hates dogs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's how this is going to get spent.
Even though I have two of them.
Yes. Well, Kyle hates his own dogs.
So yeah, so this one's I can't imagine there's a whole lot controversial about this.
Yeah, so here's how I would look at this one. The idea behind this is we have a shortage of veterinarians in the state of Colorado. And probably I'm guessing a shortage of veterinarians, across America, right? We're just not producing enough of them. Enough people, don't go to school. It's just as lengthy of a process as becoming a physician. To become a veterinarian as it is to become a physician, and it pays like way less, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the idea behind this is, or at least the proponents would say the idea behind this is we want to provide better healthcare access to our pets. Not every place has a veterinarian. There aren't enough veterinarians. So, even if we have a vet, you get an appointment, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to make that happen. My pet's not getting the health care that it needs. So I look at this initiative similarly to what a physician's assistant is, a PA is to a physician.
Yeah.
This would create basically a PA level veterinarian to a regular veterinarian. So, somebody that can do the sort of basic family practice stuff for pets, the cough and sniffle kind of veterinary care to pets that a physician's assistant does for people. So this is effectively, in my mind, as I've read it, creating a physician assistant position in the veterinary world.
And I do love dogs. So if this is needed because of a shortage of vets, I could get behind this.
Of course, that's what you say now. Now that you've been called on it.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. Next one, issue 157, funding for law enforcement. So explain this one, because obviously there's a budget for law enforcement already within the state. So what would this change?
All this does is create $350 million in state spending for law enforcement agencies that aren't, so the state's only law enforcement agency, effectively is the state patrol.
Yep.
Every other law enforcement agency, police departments, sheriff's offices, things of that nature are all locally funded. In the one of the issues we have, as you know, nobody wants to be a cop anymore, right? I mean, this is just a terrible environment to be a police officer. Constantly being second guessed about decisions you make. It's just become more of a dangerous way to feed your family than it was in the past. So the idea behind this is to create $350 million in spending from the state general fund for retention and recruiting, continuing education, things of that nature. And it also creates a fund that gives a one-time death benefit to people, to the spouses and family members of those who have lost their loved one in the line of service.
Okay. Well, public safety issues are often very popular. So again, if this one gets on the ballot, it's going to be interesting to see what this one, if this one passes.
Yeah, and I think the thing with this one, I think the legislature tries to solve this problem, when they're in session, right? They try to take care of this issue. I mean, everybody wants to make sure that our police are adequately funded so we can have the best public safety outcomes for the citizens of the state of Colorado. This creates that $350 million in new spending for this particular purpose. But it's not like we can just go print money in the state of Colorado. So that $350 million has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's the only caution to this one.
You bet.
Where do those dollars come from? Be prepared to have them taken out of, again, higher education, or transportation.
Yeah. Okay. Last one, issue 310. It says conduct of elections, but this is about creating an open primary system in Colorado, followed by ranked choice voting in the runoff with the top 4 vote getters. This is one I'm very interested in if this gets on the ballot, because this would completely change the way we do elections in Colorado. And I'm kind of open to some change. So what's your take on this one?
This is fascinating because you're right. This is monumental changes to the way we do elections in the state of Colorado. I mean, this is seismic shifting in the way that we do elections in the state of Colorado. And let me tell you, this has got the backing of a lot of really rich people here.
Okay.
Which means they're going to be able to market this thing. I think this is fascinating beyond belief. If this thing, if the signatures are verified and this ends up getting to the ballot, this is going to be just, again, monumental shift, or potentially a monumental shift to the way we do elections in the state of Colorado. Here's the sort of my first take on this is I looked at it and I was like, this is a statutory change.
Yeah,
Well,
that was interesting.
You know, almost all of this stuff is protected in the Constitution. And it's like, let me go read the Constitution when it comes to elections. Just make sure I have a pretty complete understanding of what constitutional protections are in place for elections in the state of Colorado. And guess what? There aren't many. It really comes down to electors and eligibility to vote that's in the Constitution. No protections for parties and how they conduct elections.
Interesting.
Right? So there's no constitutional, at least from what I saw, and you know, maybe one of our viewers is going to see something differently, but no constitutional protection for Republicans to have a caucus and primary system the way that they currently have it, or for Democrats to have that, right? For any party to be able to have that. And so I thought it's kind of interesting as to what this initiative does. And it basically says, we're going to have an open primary for everybody.
Yep.
So
Could
Republicans, and the only way you get to the ballot is through this primary process, which means we no longer have the caucus system in the state of Colorado.
Which I'm not all that bothered by if that went away.
Well, you know, some people, I think, Kyle, have made the argument that the parties continue to shrink in the state of Colorado and unaffiliated voters continue to grow. And that's because they're tired of all of the nonsense that happens within the party system. I mean, I've made the argument numerous times that, unfortunately, it seems that we just get the extremes. You know, the Democrats put up the most liberal candidates and the Republicans put up the most conservative candidates. And sometimes it's right to be able to govern from the middle.
I'm unaffiliated. I'm centrist in a lot of views. That's one reason why I'm supportive of this. I think it would moderate things.
You know, what it does is it just says, hey, top 4 people
regardless of party,
regardless of party, top 4 vote getters in the primary, and the primary is going to be everybody's on the same primary ballot. So you're no longer going to have a Republican primary ballot, a Democratic primary ballot, a Libertarian primary ballot. It's just going to be one primary ballot. Top 4 getters. So the top 4 people that are vote getters in that primary election then would go on to compete in the general election.
Interesting.
So jungle primary, you know, followed by ranked choice voting.
Yeah. So like, for example, in this year's CD5 primaries, the Dems and the Republicans, Jeff Crank, Dave Williams, I don't think there was anybody else on the Republican primary, but there were 2 on the Democratic primary and several others running from other parties, all of those would have been on the same ballot. Top 4 would have made the runoff. So it would be interesting to see. But in that runoff with 4, then it's ranked choice voting.
Mm-hmm.
So you rank order your 4 people when you get in the ballot booth or at home when you're filling it out. And then the way I understand it, if the top person doesn't have 50% of the vote, they take the person who was last, reopen their ballots. Whoever they voted for in second position gets reallocated among the other 3. And you do that until somebody gets over 50%. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, effectively. I think that's right. I think there's still a lot of understanding that needs to happen when it comes to ranked choice voting. But yeah, I think that's effectively it. I think the other issue is how do you get to the primary ballot in the first place?
Yep. And that's,
in order to be able to compete on the primary ballot, how do you get there?
It's strictly it would only be signatures in this case, right?
Well, that's what I think, but
Yeah,
I don't know if that's going to be left to parties to decide.
Interesting. Well, that is probably one part I should research a little bit more. But on this issue, the interesting thing is here, sometime in the next couple of weeks, either our next episode or the one after that, we're actually going to have proponents for this issue on the podcast to talk about it. And that way they can explain it in more detail and answer some of those things that I'm still confused about.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot around this one. I think one of the challenges for this initiative is so long. It's, you kind of wonder, to your point last week, are we going to end up with some ballot fatigue? And in something that is, I think, incredibly complicated to understand, unless the proponents of this initiative do an incredibly great job of educating the public, and by educating the public, I mean pitching their perspective on this, their spin on what this initiative is going to do, it's easy for voters in the state of Colorado to vote no.
Yeah.
So I think this one's got an uphill climb, but it's got a lot of really rich people supporting it.
Yeah. My guess is their polling has probably been pretty positive, which is why they put it on the ballot in the first place. I think if it was underwater in polling, they might not have gone forward with needing to get that many signatures. I don't know that for sure. But again, here in the next couple of weeks, we should learn a lot more about this one. I think everybody feels like it's kind of a foregone conclusion that this one's actually going to end up on the ballot. It's going to have enough signatures. So I am looking forward to talking to their folks. And then at some point after that, we can have somebody on who maybe doesn't agree with it. We can let our listeners and viewers maybe understand both sides of it. But we'll hear first from the folks who are putting it on the ballot.
Yeah. And again, I think generally speaking, gets rid of the caucus system in the state of Colorado, creates this jungle primary, and then allows people to be picked based on that ranked choice voting.
Okay. Well, that's kind of the core of the episode there, talking about the ballot issues. Again, 3 are certified. One of those could be going away depending on what happens in the special session. 6 more awaiting signatures. Again, one of those could go away based on the special session. So in theory, we could have as many as 7 issues on the ballot this fall. Again, not quite as extreme as I thought we were headed for, but again, could be a pretty long list of statewide.
And keep in mind that 7 statewide issues on the ballot. That doesn't include, as we've talked about before, all of the local initiatives that might end up on the ballot.
Yeah,
Colorado whether they be Springs, county, municipal, or whatever.
Yeah, here in Colorado Springs, we're going to have 2C back on the ballot, which is the road improvements. I think that campaign's actually kicking off tomorrow night. And so just that one. So you get cities and counties and school districts and other things. And yeah, it's going to be a long ballot.
It is, which I guess is an argument in favor of mail-in voting. That way you're not standing in the, in the line in the booth filling out this ballot, trying to understand what all this stuff means. You can at least sit around your kitchen table and look at your blue book as you're filling out your ballot.
Yeah, we don't want people passing out in the voting booth from standing for so long.
That's right. All the military people that stood at attention all those years would just be enfranchised more than other voters, right?
Right.
Because they're used to standing all that time.
True. Anything pissing you off this week?
Kyle, it amazes me that you even have to ask the question.
Next time,
of course.
Now on, I'll just say, what is pissing you off?
There you go. Absolutely. Because it's always something. I've had to rank choice vote my issues that are pissing me off to come forward on the podcast, right? So, I mean, there are that many of them. So I've had to sort of rank choice them to say, okay, this one this week, we're going to do another one next week. But here it is. First of all, let me preface this with, I get a lot of grief from my Republican friends for being too hard on Republicans on our podcast.
Yep.
Like I tend to be pissed off about things Republicans are doing more than Democrats. But I do that for kind of a simple, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a rhino, that's expected.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's as somebody who wants to take personal responsibility for me and mine, that's expected. Like we need to police ourselves first, right? We need to take care of us before we try to take care of the other side. And let me tell you, we've got a lot of taking care of us that we need to do. But this week, I'm here to complain about the Democrats. God damn it!
I'll share it tonight when I go to the convention.
Oh yes, please do. Here's what's got me pissed off about the Democrats. A month ago, it is all about Joe Biden's our best choice. He's going to be great moving forward. Maybe he has a little gaffe here and there, but by golly, man, he is really on top of it. He's older, but he is definitely, has the mental acuity to be able to take care of this nation moving forward. I mean, all of these Democrats are saying this. Maybe he's old, but he really has the mental capacity to move this nation forward. That's, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, whatever. All of a sudden, he has this disaster of a debate performance. He finally backs out. Now they got a 58-year-old running for president who's got lots of energy, and they're trying to promote that energy. And so now all of a sudden this other guy doesn't have the mental acuity to do this. He doesn't have the mental capacity, the stamina to take on the responsibilities of President of the United States. Jeez, Kyle, I get that there is zero consistency in politics today.
I was going to say, hypocrisy is surprising you?
Oh my gosh, it's are you seeing a lot of chiropractors at the Democratic National Convention? Because they have flipped around so quick, I'm guessing there's a ton of whiplash happening here.
I'll have to look and see. There might be some booths for that.
Like they have a booth specifically set up for chiropractors, so you can come in and get your whiplash taken care of because you've so quickly spun on this issue. I mean, and it's like literally like Joe Biden hadn't even run for president at all.
Yeah.
It's like we just completely forget. Hey, everything that happened last month. It's like they're trying to use the force on us or something, right? These are not your choices for president.
Well, and part of the problem is, on some level, it works.
Yeah, which is the part that frustrates me so much. And believe me, I get that my side engages in this too. I do. I get it that everybody does this in politics because it works. It's consistency just has zero merit. Consistency has no place in our current political system. I wish it did. It should. I would love it. Just kind of like, all the Republicans that are going after this dude's military service, when our guy got a deferment for the draft, right? No consistency there either.
Yeah.
But in this circumstance, holy mackerel, it's been amazing to watch the Democrats spin and flip on this issue as quickly as they have. I mean, it was like they have completely forgotten about the fact that they've got this geriatric 81-year-old that doesn't remember his own name running for president, just a month and a half ago, and they're completely defending this guy. And all of a sudden it's like he never even existed, like the Soviets erasing people from the history books or something.
Well, let's see what maybe rises to the top next week.
Well, so that's absolutely. And I was thinking about this, Kyle, in fairness to you, because I always get the therapy, right? I get to talk about the stuff that's pissing me off
Yep.
all the time. And I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I never give you the chance to talk about the same thing. So is it, again, I get that you're in Chicago right now. There's got to be a ton pissing you off being at the Democratic National Convention, but is there anything in particular that's pissing you off this week?
Generally for me, it's kind of interesting. And this happened yesterday. I had to drive I-25. So it's not necessarily
on your way to the airport to get to the Democratic National Convention, because that's where you are right now.
Exactly. So it's not technically a political issue, but I think the one thing that pisses me off more than anything is when I'm driving on I-25 and even on I-70, when I'm on there, is the people who drive slow in the left lane and you can't pass them. Colorado law says that on any road that has a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit or above and 2 or more lanes, you drive in the right lane, you pass in the left lane, and then you go back in the right lane. Anybody who's driven on I-25 knows people will camp out in that left lane and not get out of your way. And I think it's the biggest cause of road rage in Colorado. I know it's a huge cause of me getting pissed off while I'm driving. So that's probably, at least for me right now, that's the one thing that's pissing me off the most.
Boy, I tell you what, you might be there with a lot of people. Well, you want to talk about nonpartisan issues. Yeah, man, holy mackerel. I've said numerous times, I should be able to put like a 2x12 on the front of my car as a bumper and just be able to politely nudge those people out of the way that are in the left lane, not passing.
I mean, if you've watched NASCAR and seen somebody just kind of bump somebody and kind of spin them out of the way, absolutely. Maybe that's a law we need to work on.
Yeah, for sure.
If the highway patrol isn't going to enforce the law, then maybe there's some alternatives.
Who would have known? Kyle Blakely, young, hip guy getting kicked out of Wrigley Field for being disruptive, has turned into that old guy who wants kids to get off his lawn, or in this particular case, wants the kids to get out of his lane.
Exactly. So I'm officially old.
There you go. Hey, I agree with you though. As I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of Coloradans would agree with you as well. Even those who are violators.
True. They probably
the ones that have no clue what they're doing in the left lane
will totally agree with me. So
absolutely.
Well, thanks again for another fun episode. We'll be back next week. Like we said, we're going to spend some more time on some of the ballot issues as we get closer to November. But we'll be back next week. And then coming up in a few weeks, we're actually going to be talking with Mayor Yemi Mobolade from Colorado Springs. We're getting him scheduled for probably the middle of September. So that'll be coming up. And again, remember to follow us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Follow us on Facebook, and please leave comments if you've got a subject you want us to look into, something you want to take issue with that we've said, you're more than welcome to challenge us on it. And we'll, as we start to look through the comments, we'll probably pull some out and talk about them on here.
I 100% completely agree with you. Here's what I would like to hear some comments on, because they're out there, right? The people that are going to say they have a constitutional right to drive in the left lane. I want to hear your comments on your constitutional right to drive in the left lane and the fact that Kyle can't make you get out of it.
Nice.
Because by God, you have a constitutional right to do it.
Hopefully we'll get some folks we hear from on that. That would be great.
That'd be awesome. I love it, Kyle.
All right. Take care. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.